You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.
When you're working in a 2D environment, you can curate that person's experience and what they're looking at and what they're listening to. And in a full 360 immersive environment, they can look anywhere. They can interact with objects, and everyone's going to go in and interact with that environment in a slightly different way. So what does that mean for how we learn, how we train, how we allow the fact that we have hands and eyes to become part of that experience, and the technology knows it? And so things like medical training and surgical training, suddenly you can work on the motions and the movements that have to happen so your body gets some of that muscle memory in it and the confidence.
Hello and welcome to the Times Higher Education podcast. I'm Eliza Compton, Interim Editor of Campus, Times Higher Education's best practice platform. Campus is where you'll find resources with tips, advice and opinion on all aspects of higher education, from teaching and learning to leadership, written by academics and experts from all around the world. Just go to timeshighereducation.com/campus. Today's episode of the podcast looks at the future of technology in the classroom and how extended reality, or XR, and artificial intelligence are changing the ways that universities teach and students learn. My guest is an expert in immersive technology whose experience spans education-focused positions with big tech companies such as Meta, where she was head of immersive learning, and Amazon, as well as her current role in higher education. Monica Arés is Executive Director of the Innovation, Digital Education and Analytics Lab at Imperial College London. In this conversation, we talk about the evolution of edtech, the benefits and costs that come with it, and what she thinks teaching technology will look like in 2034. She describes a personalised, creative world with fewer screens, an insight that surprised me. Hi, Monica, and welcome to the THE podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Could you start perhaps by giving us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your work?
Sure, of course. I'm the Executive Director of the Idea Lab at Imperial Business School, and we're really focused on developing cutting-edge educational technologies that help solve some of our biggest challenges that we have in education, but also really bring us into the future of what learning is going to look like now that we have a whole new set of tools to work with, including artificial intelligence and all of our immersive technologies.
Yes, fantastic. Well, we're going to get into the AI and the XR in the course of the interview. But I wanted to start with asking a little bit about you. In a couple of articles, you've mentioned that we don't encounter in our education lives or even in our work lives too many people who really inspire us and give us those fantastic aha moments. But who have been the mentors who have influenced your life or career?
Honestly, I have to say my dad's one of the biggest ones. He's probably the most curious and creative person I've ever known. And so when you're younger, that means it shows up in a lot of different places. So the dinner table was filled with conversations. If at school we learned something that he knew something about, which was almost everything, he could tell it in a story-like fashion, and he could really bring it to life. He grew up in Spain. We were in the United States, so there were different points of view as well on history and all these other things. So they became really kind of these fun conversations that we would have in debates. But he was also, he was a builder by trade. And so he loved to bring things to life. And every time we had a school project or we wanted to visualize something, he would run down to his shed, bring stuff up, and we'd build the whole thing. And it would just be this really incredible bonding moment. But also, I feel like those are the lessons and the conversations that we had that I still remember beyond almost what I learned in the classroom. And so what he really instilled with us is the idea of, like, every time we asked if something was possible, the answer was, I don't know, but we'll figure it out, right? And so that resilience of when you're building new things, when it's something you haven't done before, when you're unsure about the outcome, don't let that stop you. Just start building and then figure out what happens. And it'll work or it won't, right? We would take cars apart and end up with like 5 screws on the driveway afterwards, but the car still worked. We don't know why, but those little moments of you have to be brave and you have to really kind of try things out, I think helped me throughout my career and my learning to lead with curiosity, which opens up a lot more doors, and also just the flexibility for trial and error But, when I started working at Facebook, it was in the early days of virtual reality. And so we were trying to bring experiences to life. And I got the opportunity to work with some really great characters in the industry. So Neil deGrasse Tyson and Jane Goodall, who they were people whose research and careers were fueled by their passion and curiosity. And they desperately wanted to share that. And they wanted to use this new technology to tell stories in a different way, to help people step into those worlds and those environments that can make them feel like they were really part of it so that they could care. And that, to me, just being able to work with someone who devoted their career to that, to their passion, and they were constantly looking for new mediums and new ways to connect to learners, also just really resonated with me and made me grateful to be working on technology that could do that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're speaking about your dad, who obviously is very practical, very real world kind of learning. And what an incredible thing to have crossed paths with Jane Goodall. That's incredible. What really laid or sowed the seeds then for your interest in this confluence of technology and education?
Yeah, it honestly happened by accident. In my very first job, I was in New York City as an actuary, and they had an outreach program. So we got to go volunteer in the public schools in New York City. And I remember loving working with the students, but became very aware that there wasn't a whole lot of those aha moments going on. They weren't really interacting with a lot of things in the classroom. It was sort of that traditional, like black and white 2D learning from a book. And, these were, again, early days, but I really thought back to what it was that got me excited about learning. And it was every time we brought technology into the classroom and we could suddenly model things, we could see things in 3D, we could have the cause and effect because the technology allowed us to do that connected what we were learning to different patterns that we saw, that helped us get to answers we didn't know because we could take a look at the way things are behaving. I thought that was something that was desperately missing from sort of the K-12 experience that I was seeing. Again, I was just a volunteer, so I wasn't really ingrained in it, but it really stuck in my head and made me feel like I wanted to be part of the solution. And I hadn't felt that before. It was kind of like, you go through school, you get your first job and you just sort of do it. But there was an interesting feeling that came over me of like, I think I know how we can help solve this. I think I know how we can increase the number of aha moments and the way that people learn through inquiry and exploration. And my beating drum has always been like, how do I unlock curiosity and creativity and connection through technology? So I ended up pursuing that path. I feel grateful I was able to. Went to graduate school to understand what the possibilities were and start building that network. And then I got to teach for a number of years, first in a traditional classroom. And then I wanted the tools to allow me to do more. So I ended up in the planetarium space, which I didn't realize was the precursor to VR at the time. But we only had the old star balls. So it's like, here are the stars. And to make things appear in 3D and to move across the dome, we had to do all that by hand. So it was sort of the early ways of designing to help people visualize things that naturally are pretty hard to see, like eclipses and phases of the moon, and how to bring them to life in a way that would stick. So that was a lot of fun. But, I then ran into another hurdle where it's like, I had to scale it beyond those people that were just coming into the room for those lessons. And technology was, again, that answer. So it led me to the tech industry, first at Amazon, where we were charged with, they had a platform-based learning solution, but it was very, very early days. So it was almost the equivalent of putting PDFs online.
When was this?
This was back in 2014, I think.
Okay.
So it was like we recognized technology could increase access to education, but a lot of the platform-based learning tools were, like here's something that you read and here's a multiple choice question. So very, very much one directional. But the challenge was, can we actually make it more interactive? Can we put in some of those 3D objects within the platform and have people move things around and see what sticks and what doesn't, and lead through inquiry and have multiple learning pathways that could happen, like the choose your own adventure. So that was a lot of fun to start to figure that out and understand how that unlocked different ways to learn in a platform-based setting without an instructor right there to kind of guide you through it. And then I eventually found my way over to Facebook, and that's when I got to, like, right away try on one of the early virtual reality headsets. And I think the second I put that on, it was so obvious to me. I was like, oh, this is the medium I've been looking for, where you can really learn in these environments. And there are all these questions that we still had to figure out. It was such early days, but when you're working in a 2D environment, you can control, you can curate that person's experience and what they're looking at and what they're listening to. And in a full 360 immersive environment, they can look anywhere. They can interact with objects, and everyone's going to go in and interact with that environment in a slightly different way. So what does that mean for how we learn, how we train, how we allow the fact that we have hands and eyes to become part of that experience, and the technology knows it. And so things like medical training and surgical training, suddenly you can work on the motions and the movements that have to happen so your body gets some of that muscle memory in it and the confidence. And so all these incredible ways to start to think about how we use this technology to do it differently and unlock what we've been missing. And then I was able to really, from that point, say, well, hold on, we have to build out the whole ecosystem. So that included training the next generation of creators and developers, and really starting to understand how we then can, kind of push this out into educational institutions and learning environments at scale. So all of this with new technology, there's no playbook. So you really are trying to create the different pieces of the ecosystem and build the bridges that will eventually connect and allow for these systems to be a lot easier. We ran into a lot of hurdles. Virtual reality is hard to develop in. It's hard to integrate at scale. Everything was not quite ready for that for a lot of reasons. And so then when artificial intelligence, the Gen AI kind of kicked in, there is a very immediate use case for it. It is faster to implement. And so the idea of not only helping us build better VR environments and XR environments, but the fact that we can actually personalize learning in a way that we haven't been able to really, I think, kind of stuck with me. This is something we need to do immediately. And so coming back into a learning environment in higher ed where we have a lab where we can actually really work with these different technologies to understand the different components of these new systems that will really merge together AI and XR. We haven't ever had the capability to bring together digital and physical quite in this way. And so the tool set it's unlocking is really incredible. So it's fun to be in a space where we can make sure that we're building, iterating, and kind of piloting all of these things, but in the learning environment where we directly access that audience.
Yeah, well, your work at the Idea Lab at Imperial College London sounds very interesting. Can you tell us a bit about what you actually do? So how you work on the technology, what your role is in the lab?
Absolutely. So Idea Lab actually is an acronym. So it stands for Innovation, Digital Education, and Analytics. So digital education is something that has historically been part of this. It used to be the EdTech Lab, and that's how this originally came to be, and really offers just a range of online programs like our Global MBA and others for learners who can't necessarily come to campus to do those programs, but who need to do it from home, and offering that same level of experience and fidelity and accreditation afterwards. Obviously, analytics to help us identify educational challenges and make all the data-driven decisions we have to, especially with newer technologies. We're going to make sure that we're doing it carefully. But innovation is really our main driver and our main focus. And so it's piloting all the different innovative solutions with AI and XR that will kind of reimagine our relationship with knowledge and transform the future of learning. So there are all these different areas that we're looking into, like creating AI avatar assistants. And so they're trained on all the course materials and lectures and research-backed data and, kind of brilliant professors who've been teaching these courses for multiple years. We can put all that, into the back end and create these avatar equivalents, either of the professor or an assistant that goes with it. And then our students can converse with them. So they can use it to brainstorm or ask questions about the course material or receive feedback on ideas that they have, or even just for studying. So we've been piloting those and already seeing that they landed really well. That students say there's like a high level of analytic thinking that they feel like the bot has, that there's quite a relative emotional tone to it. And they're starting to use it to do a little bit more like questions they wouldn't ask in class. They'll go home and ask the bot. Or when they want to keep digging deeper into something, they'll really, continue to talk through it until they're ready to stop with that. So everything from that to making sure our analytics are something that we are prepared to take some of our current more cloud-based data and turn it into, systems that we can use for different levels of AI and XR.
So is there a sense maybe that an AI professor, I do find this quite hard to imagine, I have to confess, a sense that you can ask perhaps more questions than you would be able to in class? I remember from my time as a student, there was a sense that you could ask a question sort of once, but if you didn't quite understand what the tutor was telling you in the answer, you couldn't, there was a limited number of times that you could say, but what? But can you go further?
So there's that one, which is like, oh, I didn't actually get the answer that helped me connect to it, and then you get embarrassed to ask more. So absolutely, those were happening. It's also the students who get very excited and they want to keep talking, they want to keep asking more and more, but then usually the educator has to be like, well, hold on, you're taking up all the class time, so we're going to reel it back. So all those different ways in which it's hard to get that immediate feedback and that kind of the speaking time that you would normally get with the expert, because this AI driven assistant has a lot of the same knowledge that professor has or that the course can offer. It's not perfect. There's certain areas where we did have to program it to say, actually, I don't really know that, but then we put that on a list and the professor could talk about it the next time that the class gathered. So, but you think of when you do Google searches, you search something and you get one quick answer, you have to filter through, but now you can talk to that platform, right? You can ask it questions, you can have the back and forth. It's not just a Q&A response. It's really more like, I need to think about this, help me understand these different pathways, where am I missing certain pieces of my knowledge? So those AI assistants, we started our piloting there, but bumping it into AI simulations as well. And so piloting these simulations, both through AI and VR experiences, they offer this really unique combination of practice through natural language and interactive learning and this sort of detailed feedback that you couldn't get from a multiple choice answer or even just a traditional answer that we're used to giving and learning. So they're unlocking this dynamic and intuitive rehearsal space that previously just wasn't possible with our tools. And so it's allowing students to develop fluency and confidence in things like problem solving and communication and leadership skills that historically have been really, really hard to teach. And in business school, we often teach them, and then you don't necessarily implement them as a leader in your business or in your work world for years later. And so this is something that we're hoping we can really allow people to have a space to go back and practice before a pitch, a difficult conversation, feedback they may have to give to someone on their team, a public presentation. These are all areas now where you can practice your own part and get it perfect. But the reality is, when we are nervous in the real world, it doesn't always come out the same way. So can we help create simulations where people can feel some of those nerves, and then practice with different personas on the other side or different reactions that might occur as you go through it. So those rehearsal spaces generated through, you can do it just with AI, but it's, we're also combining some of the more realistic environments and avatars to push the limits of just how much do we have to build out versus where the value is across the different modalities. But again, a whole new area that just wasn't possible before at scale, for sure. You could maybe do it in sort of a role play type of thing, which was a little unsettling. So these environments are just a whole new space. Feedback is another thing we've also been looking into, because oftentimes professors or TAs, you spend a very long time writing a paper, doing a project, you turn it in and you get some feedback, but not enough to make you stop and relearn and really question and ponder what new pathways you could get from it. So AI is very good at helping identify, these are 5 things you did really well. Here are 5 areas where maybe you could improve. Do you want to talk about it? And because it's AI, you can then continue to have a conversation with it until that feedback makes sense to you, or you've created sort of a newer learning pathway. So these are all areas that I think if we're thinking of what an AI system will look like, it's all these different components that really change, the way in which we interact with these tools, and they offer us a much more personalized way to get the content, but also then to kind of assess our own understanding. And of course, at the foundation of all of this has to be sort of the capabilities of data and analytics and that knowledge management. And so we have a lot of information post-pandemic. Everything's been recorded, every lecture, all the reading materials, all the books that professors have written are all in PDFs. So there's a lot of digital content. It all lives in the cloud somewhere. And so we have to figure out how we can, make sure that this is all AI ready data so that we can use them for these different capabilities that we want to do, from simulations to avatar assistants. But also it's going to become hugely valuable to enable faculty and staff to analyze courses and streamline some of the development that currently takes us a lot of time, and then integrate these new tools and experiences into these AI-driven systems. So I think we're moving towards a path where we can really set a new standard in tech education and training. That, not that, again, it's not that we didn't want to do it before, we just didn't have the tools. And now that they're here, suddenly the whole world is opening up to really revolutionize how we do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It seems to me a little ironic that humanizing education is being facilitated by machine learning, but I know what you mean, that you can have individualized responses at scale, which is something that's not possible for an individual educator to do, or much more difficult at any rate. We know that all technology comes with its risks and costs and unintended consequences. In our little pre-chat before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the costs of AI. Can you sort of see what the challenges and difficulties perhaps might be down the road with implementing some of this technology?
Yeah, and we talked about there's a lot of cost associated with all of this. Starting off with sort of the virtual reality component, in the very early days, it was millions of dollars to create an experience, and many, many, many months. I mean, the time was also a factor, and so we had a challenge of how are we going to be able to build enough content to help us do this at scale for multiple different verticals and sectors. And so I think that has become improved a little bit with AI, and integrating, I think, will unlock some of that. I think the thing with AI that I always kind of get tripped up on is historically we have built products almost like mathematical function machines. So we put something in, it goes into the box, and we probably understand what's going to come out. With AI, it's more like scientific method. And so we're putting stuff in and it's giving us slightly different answers every single time, just based on how it goes and scrapes all the information it can and figures out what that next pathway is. And so there's like this moment of discovery where we actually aren't sure of what it's going to give us, or where we can push those boundaries, or how we're going to best work with it and talk to it. So there's a fluency that we need to develop like any other language, but there's this language of how to work with and connect with AI so that we can get the best out of merging human intellect and AI together. But we're still, it's like we're just discovering all of that still. So I think that's a really interesting space and a challenge. It's all based on the data that it has. AI is only as good as the data that it has. We know that a lot of our current data is inherently biased, our historical data. So that's something that can we use this moment to make sure that we're not giving people information that continues to perpetuate some of these biases within our history. So there are a lot of great organizations starting to do work on that. But I think that's a really important area to look at. And of course, they're just like every new technology, there are always concerns around data privacy and accessibility and the risk of widening that digital divide. And so they have to be carefully managed, probably by a cross-functional collaboration between policymakers and tech companies and educational institutions and the research. So these are all things that whenever we build something new, we get very excited, we go fast and furious, we find the best use cases, and then we start to look at all of these things. And so just from the sort of that last tech boom, can we understand and learn from some of those, those missteps that we took and try to do it better this time? Also recognizing that AI it's a very different kind of tool and way to build and work with it. But the sustainability with AI is something, we've heard a lot in the news as well. We manage it on smaller pieces, but we know that as we start to scale, sustainability is going to be an enormous factor for us to consider. So I think trying to work together on that now and understanding how we mitigate some of that or prepare for it the best we can so that we're not draining all of our resources and creating a problem that really ends up having a much harder solution down the road.
I imagine that the technology is developing so quickly that the hardware must be changing quite quickly as well.
Well, so VR, it is more of like the hardware kind of piece that we're trying to do. AI is a lot more about compute power, because again, we can consume it on current devices that we have. So, what's interesting about technology is if you look at the trajectory of where we've been and where we're going, just in the span of one human lifetime, like my own lifetime, I started learning with encyclopedias, right? And then we very quickly went into desktop computers and dial-up internet that evolved into laptops and mobile devices that allow you to learn anywhere and everywhere. But we are still in an area where we have a lot of rectangles in front of us. So whether it's a laptop, whether it's your phone, an iPad, and it's difficult for us to feel present in the world with all those rectangles in front of us. So learning, we're naturally 3D thinkers, right? Our world is in 3D and we can see things move in 3D. When you push it all into a 2D surface, it has to do a lot of mapping. And so this technology, oddly enough, is starting to create a world in which I think we're actually going to get rid of a lot of the technology that puts a barrier between us and our world, whether it's other people or the environment. And it's going to slowly start to integrate more naturally just with ourselves. And so right now you can turn your phone off and work with a chatbot just through your regular call, right? It's almost like you're calling somebody else, but you can just have a continual conversation as you're walking with an AI bot to brainstorm something or think something through. VR, again, is slowly, although it's very bulky and cumbersome now, what it can do in terms of tracking our body language and our expressions and where we're looking and our focus and our attention. If it slowly starts to go into a socially acceptable pair of regular glasses, then we can wear them around in the real world as we still interact with this intelligence that it gives us. And eventually we're going to probably have it just work very seamlessly with our own body motion. So right now we feel like there's a possibility where a lot of like the compute and everything else we have to think about because it exponentially gets harder. The world of hardware is slowly evolving and changing in a way that's going to be really interesting as we try to almost create like a more human presence, but with the intelligence that we currently get from our technology that's also blocking that presence. So it's going to be an interesting trajectory as it unfolds. Very hard to bring to life because it's hard to get all of the tech into almost these invisible spaces, but it will allow us to, I think, be much more connected with the world and each other, which is going to be exciting.
It's so interesting. You've done work in various countries. My question is whether or not there are national differences in between attitudes to using this kind of technology in your experience.
I mean, I think in the institutional level, there are. I mean, it's not so big that one's gonna, not do it. But I think that it's more in how decisions get made, right? So I think institutions in the UK often they approach new technologies with more of a robust framework for experimentation and policy development. And so sometimes it can feel a little bit slower. And it's more measured in its adoption, which is great because it's a little bit more of a careful decision. And I think in contrast, some of the US institutions, they tend to kind of follow like the tech model of innovation. And so they move a little bit more quickly. They're driven by, I would say, more of like the competitive pressure, just by how US universities are set up, all like its own little business entities. And so the integration of technology kind of, filters in at different levels at different paces, but it all happens a little bit faster in sort of that innovation mode. It's not all successful, but it does seem to sort of catch and try and move with it. I think both approaches offer really valuable insights, and a global perspective can actually probably help us in this moment in crafting those policies that really will harness the best of both worlds. Like I said, we've gone fast and furious a number of times. We've gone too slow when we've heard it. There's that happy balance in the middle. One really interesting thing trend I've seen, and this is just anecdotal, there's nothing behind it, but I've also noticed universities who are steeped in tradition and expectation don't always want to move so quickly because that students go there for that particular experience, and so it's harder for them to break the current offering that they have or the mold. Where some of the universities in the US who might not be bound by some of those restrictions have actually started working in different ways. They're starting to partner with NASA and with tech companies, and they're building little incubators inside the universities, and they're trying things, and they're evolving very quickly. But again, they have the freedom and flexibility to do it without so many kind of eyes on them. So it's almost like I love seeing this, this moment belongs to the people who think differently. It almost belongs to like the rebels in a way. And so it's also interesting to see that in the personalities of institutions and who is brave enough to try to do some of this stuff, knowing that you don't want to interrupt a value that you're offering to the students, but can you do some of these things on top of it without changing everything? Or, just the act of getting it in motion and seeing what happens is hugely beneficial. People have to create entirely new programs to help students learn how to create some of these worlds and start to work with this technology. And so those that are adaptable really are the ones who are starting to come out on top of all this.
It's very interesting. And as you were speaking, I think we picked out 2014 as a date where sort of things had started to change a bit, which is only 10 years. It's extraordinary how much things have changed. If you could take out your crystal ball and just as a final question and project forward to 2034, what do you think the classroom or university education might be looking like?
Yeah, oh, that's interesting. I always say like we're going towards a model that's going to be almost invisible. Like again, we'll get rid of all the platform-based constraints that we currently have in our education, and it will be a lot more human. It's going to allow us to connect with our human side, to interact with humans in a different way in situations, and it will feel like there's that personalization that caters to it. So it won't be a one-size-fits-all approach. It will be a very much a customized learning experience that can adapt to the individual learner and their speed and their learning styles, which I think is going to be great for some of our neurodivergent learners who are incredibly creative, but it's very hard in the current rigid structure for them to shine and show that capability, that superpower that they have. But, I think your personalized AI will be on your learning journey from the very beginning. So it will have all the data and knowledge from all the classes you've ever taken. It will be sweeping those as well as understanding how you're learning and interacting so that it can, you can carry this with you. We'll break down the walls of schools and homes and museums eventually. And it's going to become sort of that first solution for true lifelong learning. Where if you want to see a visualization, you can just pop it open in AR or some other technology in your desk so you can see it in real time. As you walk around the world, it will understand where you are in place and space. And maybe there's historical information that it could just feed you. You'll always have that tutor. You'll always have that person who can unlock the aha moments in this bot because it's with you on this lifelong journey. Making sure it's feeding you relevant information, but also being as successful as you can, whether it's the rehearsal spaces and simulations, information, someone to always talk to. So no one will ever have to learn alone, so to speak, which I think is going to help a lot of people on that journey.
I like this idea of automated recall. So often you're reading, so often in my work, I'm reading something and I think this is familiar. I've read something about this before, but I can't remember exactly where, and going through and finding it is quite the exercise. But if I had a tool that would somehow be able to read my mind, I think that's a very appealing idea.
I think so too. And again, it's going to help us with all the skills that just historically have been very, very challenging. So it's going to help us every learner unlock that creativity and curiosity and connection. It will help develop, especially, my gosh, we're going to lose like 100 million jobs in the next 10 years, but we're also going to create new ones because we're building new industries and new opportunities. So we have trained students in a very predictable type of learning scenario for a very continuously unpredictable world, and there's a disconnect there. And so with these new tools, I'm hoping we can actually really teach and prepare students to be adaptable, to be innovative, to be problem solvers, and to have the communication that goes along with them. Because we don't do a great job at that right now, and we're not going to prepare them for their future if we can't start to integrate that into our tools and our learning experiences. So I hope we can unlock those too.
Well, that seems like a good note to finish on. This has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Times Higher Education podcast. Thank you for listening. If you have suggestions for topics or guests you'd like to hear on the show, please get in touch at eliza.compton@timeshighereducation.com. And for resources on all aspects of the global university sector, visit Campus at timeshighereducation.com/campus. We'll see you next time.
You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.